Okay, so something that I have often asked myself, and that I'm sure other people would want to ask me, is how do I know that I'm trans? Now, you would think that I would probably say something like, well, I always felt like I was not a girl, and I always felt like I was not a boy, and I always felt like being put into these categories was wrong, and that's only sort of true. You see, sometimes I do feel like a girl, sometimes I do feel like a guy, sometimes I do feel like I'm a gender. Most of the time, I don't really feel like I'm any gender at all. So I think that when we ask the question, are you trans? How do you know you're trans? We're actually putting a binary there of cis versus trans. We're imposing this simplistic idea of what gender identity is. I think a lot of people kind of have this idea that there's like some button in your brain somewhere and it's labeled M or F, or for a few people maybe A for agender or something like that. Um, but what if we think that gender in your brain's image of your body, your brain's image of who you are in society, um, the different hormones that have been in your body at different points in your development, all of these things, how normative your body is, what you think it should be versus what it is, why you think that, the social influences, who you've known that's influenced how you see yourself. I think if we start seeing all of these things as very complex and seeing all of these things as being different for every single person, just like every single person's body is different, every single person's brain is different, every single person's hormonal levels throughout their development are different, every single person's relationship with their culture and the different cultures that they're exposed to is different. Um, so if we start seeing that and we see that gender is actually um, strewn throughout all of these things, all kinds of different areas of biology and society and personal identity, we start thinking that, maybe most people are a little bit non-binary. Maybe most people don't always feel like they're assigned gender or another gender. Maybe most people don't always sit around thinking about what gender they are and feeling like a certain gender at every moment in time. Um, So we start getting this idea that maybe trans isn't just one thing, maybe trans isn't an objective thing, maybe trans doesn't really correlate to just there's something in my brain that says I'm trans and one thing only, and it doesn't have anything to do with my self-concept or choice. Um, and that's how I see it. But I think it's very threatening to a lot of people who are kind of on one end of the spectrum and have a lot of gender dysphoria that's very intense and very constant, and who need to be able to medically transition in order to live a happy life. Um, these people are fitting into this more mainstream idea of trans as, okay, this is one thing about me, I was born this way and I don't have any choice, any real choice. I either live miserable, die, or transition. Um, what I'm saying is challenging to that, but it doesn't need to be, because if you consider that everyone's different and there's a huge range in many different dimensions of and many different meanings of what gender can be, then yeah, those people have space too, but people like me have space too as well. So as far as how do I know I'm trans, I would say I don't know I'm trans, but I used judgment and decided what I wanted and decided what I thought would be a better way of identifying and seeing myself and presenting myself to the world. So it kind of went down. I was 17 and I read for the first time that there were people who identified as non-binary. Before that, I'd actually already realized that I wasn't transgender in terms of I didn't identify as a man and that I didn't identify as a woman. But I hadn't realized that you could be something like that. I came up with the terms agender, bigender, just as throwaway things and went along back to living my assigned gendered life for a while until a friend of mine came out as trans, and I learned from reading online that you can actually identify as a non-binary. And then I knew, well, that's what I am. And being 17 and strong-willed, I didn't really think too hard about, well, maybe I can force myself to not be this way. Maybe this isn't really the right identity for me. I kind of just went ahead, and I was happier. And sometimes I wasn't. Sometimes I was just feeling really upset, wishing I'd never learned about trans identity, because then I had to worry about it and feel like I was being misgendered all the time and stress out about whether or not I should transition and things like that. But on the whole, I'd always not really felt like I fit into my assigned gender, and I didn't feel like transitioning to be the other binary gender, and I still stand by that decision. And it is a decision. It's something that I'm going to be deciding one way or the other for the rest of my life, and I reserve the right to change that decision. I have a lot of complicated information about how my relationship to gender, which is absolutely unique and absolutely non-binary, and fluid. It changes over time. It changes in different contexts. And the very best thing I can do is use my judgment and my evaluation and decide what I want and what I believe is right. So, yeah, that's why I'm trans, because some nature, some nurture, a whole lot of me using my brain and thinking, what should I be? What do I want to be? Who do I feel like?